Good afternoon and good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants Hangout. My name is Joe Grabowski. I will be your host for today. Really excited about the last few weeks and the next week coming up. We've been looking at ocean plastics, looking at the issue, what's happening around the world, and then what people and different organizations are doing to try and combat the problem. We've been hanging out with scientists, explorers, adventurers, conservationists, advocates, people from different institutions. It's really been a great week and a half so far. We've got about another week and a half worth of ocean events still to come. So really excited for today's event. Today we're joined by Dr. Sarah-Jeanne Royer. She's an oceanographer and currently doing a postdoctorate on marine debris at the International Pacific Research Center at the University of Hawaii. Her research is linked to the pathways and fate of marine debris and plastic pollution in the ocean. She's been highly involved with Sustainable Coastlines Hawaii, which is the biggest organization for beach cleanups in all of Hawaii and I believe a lot of other places. They're doing some really great work. For 3 years, she served as their science advisor and started using data collection from volunteers and citizen science projects. So Sarah, it's so great to have you joining us live today.
Thank you, Joe. It's my pleasure. I'm very excited about it. So I'm Sarah. I'm French-Canadian. I'm from Quebec City. And I'm going to talk to you today about plastic pollution and the work I've been doing in science at the University of Hawaii. So I'm going to start sharing my screen. Hopefully, you'll be able to see my presentation well. Voila. Okay, so as I mentioned, I'm an oceanographer and I'm currently working for the University of Hawaii. Before getting into my subject, I decided to introduce myself since I started basically university. So I'm going to spend 2-3 minutes just to let you know what was my pathway to get to Hawaii. So here I'm presenting you the Earth, and I did my bachelor in biology at University Laval in Quebec City, and then soon after I joined Maurice Levasseur, still at University Laval, to do a master in oceanography, so basically studying the ocean. And this was actually my first cruise, so I left Quebec to go into the Pacific Ocean, and I did my first oceanographic cruises there. So this is me on the boat, on the ship, and this is me with my instruments. So my first cruise was about 6 weeks. I got seasick. It was really rough conditions, but after a couple of weeks, I got used to it and fell in love with studying the ocean. So this was my first oceanographic cruise during my master, and then I did a second cruise still in oceanography during the same master, and I went to the Arctic. So this is the Amundsen. This is an icebreaker. So we spent 6 weeks over there sampling seawater, ice, and snow to understand better the behaviors of our ocean. So this is me on the right-hand side sampling sea ice, and on the left, it's me running experiment at about -30°C outside. So I was incubating my water at the front of the icebreaker. So this was a very exciting trip up north, very cold, but I only keep good memories. Then I moved from basically Quebec or the Arctic, and I did another master in Brazil, which was very interesting. I was at sea for a long time as well. And soon after that master, I finally got the chance to get a scholarship to go to Spain in Europe, in Barcelona. And I did basically 5 years in Spain, in Barcelona. And I did various projects. It was about 13 different oceanographic cruises all over the world, in the Arctic, and then in Antarctic down here, and then in all the oceans of the world. And the highlight of this PhD was a cruise, a circumnavigation cruise of 7 months at sea. And these are the pictures. So this is basically on the top left corner, me with the Bio Esperides. So the vessel we use for the 7 months, it's a Spanish vessel from the army. And this is me down here in my lab. So it was very crowded. So I spent 7 months measuring different gases in the ocean and algae and the biology So I was sampling day and night and working really hard for 7 months. And this is my berth. So this is my room. I always had like a colleague sleeping down. I was up there, and this is all my stuff for the 7 months. So Spain was very special. Barcelona, Catalonia. So it was a fantastic PhD. And after that, I got my doctorate degree. And during that 7-month cruise, I got the chance to go to Hawaii. So we stopped in Brazil, in Africa, in Australia, New Zealand, and we stopped in Hawaii. And this is basically where I met my supervisor at the University of Hawaii. He told me, wow, I like the research you do. I would like you to join our lab once you're done with your PhD. And this is what I did. But before getting into the topic in Hawaii, I just wanted to bring a parenthesis. So during my stay in Barcelona, this is really where I started feeling like I should help the cause of plastic pollution. So basically, I'm a runner, and I was running every single day in Barcelona. And my institute, it was right in front of the beach. And then I was like, wait a minute, should I do more than just running? And I started this group called Run and Care. So this is me running on different beaches of Barcelona and picking up trash. So I called the group Run and Care. So this is my vintage style. It's in 2009, so a little while ago. But I started running and picking up trash. Then people would leave on purpose along the beach, or they would just party, go with friends, and then they will leave or forget sometimes their trash. And what I will do was basically to run along the coastline with other people and just picking up the trash along the coastline. And the reason for it, it's basically to prevent this marine pollution to go into the ocean and then be a danger for marine life. So that was my 5 years of PhD. I was doing on the side this Run and Care project. So the big whale here is actually my institute. So I would see the tourists every day polluting the coastline. I think right now someone gave a name to it. They call it plugging. So it's basically running and picking up trash, and groups in Australia, they contacted me. So yeah, now it's a little bigger, but this is how it started. And then I moved to Hawaii in the middle of the Pacific, and I joined Kahi Pakaro with Sustainable Coastlines Hawaii, the biggest beach cleanup organization in Hawaii. And he became my friend. I was living with Kahi for almost 2 years. So I got involved in this NGO, and I started doing beach cleanups. I started attending the meetings, organizing events, and just educating people and bringing awareness to this global issue of plastic pollution. So I've had a great time with Kahi. These are pictures of our beach cleanup where we picked up tons and tons of marine debris. This is basically a group of people during a beach cleanup removing a net that was probably dumped in the ocean, in the Pacific, and that ended up in our coastline in Hawaii. And once it ends up, the fishing net in the sand, then it digs inside the sand, and it's very, very hard to remove. So this is also pictures of a beach cleanup with Sustainable Coastlines Hawaii on the island of Oahu, picking up different types of marine debris. And this is how it can look, a beach in Camilo Point in Hawaii. So on the side, of course, I was doing a lot of beach cleanups and trying to bring awareness and helping with this issue with the population in Hawaii. But my main work was basically to, as a scientist, and I did my first postdoctorate with David Carl at Seymour, University of Hawaii. And for almost 2 years, I studied the plastic degradation and the emissions of greenhouse gases from plastic in the environment. So we did many experiments, and what we discovered, it's basically that methane, ethane, ethylene, propylene, and even CO2, these bad gases that have an impact on the climate, they are emitted from plastic when plastic is exposed to sunlight. So that was our big discovery. I would be happy to share the link of our scientific paper later. So that was my first 2 years at the University of Hawaii. And then I joined IPRC, and I started working with Nikolai Maximenko on the transportation of marine debris in the ocean. So basically, this is how a polluted beach looks like. So I put a few pictures just to give you an idea of how bad it can look. This is actually in Molokai, and most of these pictures are from Hawaii. And something that we have to understand is that in Hawaii, we get a lot of debris, of marine debris, coming from outside of the island. So this is like all trash that you see here. 90% and more of this marine debris waste comes from outside of Hawaii. So we are responsible as a whole, but the people living in Hawaii, they are not the people that are actually disposing their debris on the beach. So this has traveled a long, long way before reaching Hawaii. And the picture on the right at Camilo Point, you can notice that there's a lot of debris related to the fishing industry. So about half of the debris here, it belongs to the fishing industry. So basically fishing activities in the middle of the ocean creates a lot of debris. So either the fishermen, they don't use any longer their fishing nets and they will dump it into the ocean. You find a lot of ropes as well, of buoys. So all this is basically coming from outside of Hawaii. And I showed you this graph here just to make you realize that Hawaii, it's truly in the middle of the Pacific and very far away from all coastal continents. So the trash comes to Hawaii, but there's a way of, I mean, it travels a long, long way. And a lot of the trash that we find will come from Asia. So basically, there's a lot of plastic waste management issue in Asia. People, they drink out of a plastic bottle, they will eat crisp, and they will not have any facilities to dispose their trash. So a lot of it will end up on the beach and then will travel eventually in the ocean, will end up in this North Pacific garbage patch. And with high wind or storms, we'll get a lot in Hawaii. And this is the reason why we get so much of trash and marine debris in Hawaii. So this, for example, is a river in India. So you can notice here that there's a lot of plastic bags, a lot of bottles, and people, they don't have any facilities to dispose their trash. So for them, it's very easy to just dump it along the river or directly into the river. And you know that the river eventually will lead to the ocean, and then it will end up either on the beaches, or it will travel for thousands of miles in the ocean and end up in Hawaii. And something important we have to realize, it's once we dump the trash and we leave it, we discard it close to water, it ends up in the ocean. But plastic truly never disappears. What it does, it degrades. So the effect of the sun on plastic makes it degrade into smaller and smaller pieces. So it's called photodegradation. And this bottle, let's say Coca-Cola bottle, because we find a lot of Coca-Cola caps and bottles in Hawaii, these bottles, they will eventually break up into small pieces, and it's called microplastic. So it's important to remember that. And this is the type of microplastic that we find in Hawaii. So we don't know where it comes from. We don't know what it used to be, but what we know, it's that it used to be a bigger item that broke down into smaller pieces, and that ended up in the ocean and eventually on our beaches in Hawaii, which is really sad. So this is really something to remember. Plastic can live longer than us. A plastic bottle can take 300 years to degrade. So we have to really think about the way we use the plastic. Ideally, we don't use any. If we do, we have to think about the way we dispose of it. So this is something really to keep in mind here. And I'm sharing with you here an image of Hawaii microplastic. So these are two waves in Hawaii. This is the first wave. It's on the northeast side of the island of Oahu. And this is the second wave. So can you see that inside this sifter, we have so much microplastic, and this is only with 2 waves. So we get a lot of plastic in Hawaii, and it's really sad. And here at IPRC, we study the formation of garbage patches. So basically, I'm just showing you this here to show you to which extent we can understand better how plastic travels in the ocean. So this model there's a lot of maths behind it. I don't want you to remember this, but what I want you to remember is that we are, for example, mimicking where the marine debris that we leave on our coast all over the world will end up eventually. And over here, I'm looking at 10 years of modeling. So if I skip 8 years and I go straight to 2008, for example, we can see then the colors. So the reddish, yellow, and green colors, this is where most of the debris will end up in the ocean. So more red is the color, more debris we find. And the reason for showing you this is basically to see then Hawaii is over here, and then we get the North Pacific garbage patch here. So whenever we have high winds and we get a lot of storms, like right now during this season of hurricanes, a lot of the debris that is trapped inside this red North Pacific garbage patch will end up on all our beaches, mostly the northeastern beaches of Hawaii. So when we dump the plastic somewhere, it will travel in the ocean, and eventually it will either stay in the ocean, be ingested by wildlife, or it will end up, some of it will end up on our beaches in Hawaii. And we all know then it has a very, very negative effect on the wildlife. So these are very sad pictures, but I always show them to the students because it's important to realize what kind of damage plastic can have on our beautiful wildlife. And this is only a few examples of a turtle caught in a fishing net. We find a lot of them in Hawaii, then a whale, then a seabird, and then a seal. So it's really dangerous for them. Animals and wildlife didn't learn to cope with marine pollution in the ocean. They didn't adapt yet on all this plastic in the ocean. So these are the very negative effect that it can have on our wildlife. And this is, for example, a plastic bag on corals. And we know that the turtle, the sea turtle, they eat jellyfish, but a plastic bag floating in the ocean really looks like a jellyfish. So we find pretty much plastic in all stomach of sea turtles, and about 90% of the seabirds, they are eating plastic, unfortunately. And this is only a sad example that we have of a bird that ate microplastic, because the bird doesn't know what is food and what's not. He sees food either floating at sea or on the beach, and it's very attracting, all these colorful pieces of plastic. So they will eat the plastic, and eventually they will die because they cannot digest it, and they will have this feeling of feeling full. So they will no longer eat, and eventually they will just starve to death, which is really, really sad. So this is the impact of plastic pollution, and it's only one example. The last example I wanted to show you is that fish, it's the same thing. The fish will see plastic floating in the ocean, and they will think that it's food, so they will ingest this plastic. But most of the time, the plastic that's been floating for a long time in the ocean will also attract other types of pollutants. So it ends up in the fish, and eventually it will end up into the flesh of the fish that we eat. So basically, it goes in our food chain, in our food that we eat. So we are basically eating plastic. So these are some reasons, some of the very few reasons why we should be very careful about our consumption of plastic. So I showed you a few examples of the science we do, the effect of plastic, but now I just want to finish by this. How can you help? So how can you help with this big issue of plastic pollution? So I'm giving you a few examples, and then I'm happy to discuss more examples with you afterwards. So a few examples. You can avoid, you can refuse and say no to plastic. And mostly here, I'm talking about single-use plastic. I know that we have cars made out of plastic, we have phones, we have a lot of materials that we use every day that is made out of plastic. But when I'm talking about refusing plastic, I'm talking about single-use plastic and disposable plastic. So it's really easy to say no. And you're the next generation. You have a very, very high impact on people around you, but also your parents and also in the way that you'll be spending your own life. So if you start young, it's even better. So what to do then? We refuse plastic. What can we use? But it's as easy as we can use some reusable items. So they are so beautiful on top of that. So you can find some forks, knives, and then you can also find some water bottles that are made out of reusable material. You have beautiful straws made out of bamboo. You have also bags that you can use and reuse again and then wash that are not made out of single-use plastic. So these are only a few examples of what you can do instead of using like plastic pieces every day. You can also pick it up. So if you see trash, instead of looking at it, you just pick it up and put it in the trash. People will see you, they will look at you, and you will be the next leader in that sense. So this is something that can be done. And also you don't litter. So sometimes people at the beach, they see a trash can, even if it's full, they will still feel okay putting their trash over there. But you have to think that if it's very windy, it will all end up in the ocean. So we have to be very careful about littering. And then you share what you learn and lead by example. So these are very hot topic nowadays. A lot of students will discuss plastic pollution, and then they will discuss with their parents and brothers and sisters and friends. So this is very powerful. So you learn and you lead by example. And then eventually you can get involved in government, because eventually the laws and policies and banning plastic will be like one of the major solutions to this big, big issue of plastic pollution. And then finally, you can make art and educate. So you can use marine debris like Shannon here from Sustainable Coastlines Hawaii and make these beautiful pieces of art. Or you can go a little bigger and work with Adidas. They are working with fishing nets and making running shoes. And then Burio is also using marine debris for skateboards and method for bottles. So these are small examples of what can be done. And there's a lot more space for improvement. And finally, you can clean the beach. So in Hawaii, with Sustainable Coastlines Hawaii, we have beach cleanup basically every month. And we also travel on other neighboring islands where we conduct beach cleanups as well. And it's a way of bringing awareness, but also of being together and helping. So this is something to keep in mind. No matter where you live, I'm sure that there are some beach cleanups organized. If it's not a beach cleanup, it might be a river or even a path where you go hiking if you don't have the ocean or the sea close by. So cleaning the beach is also a very nice thing to do and helpful. So I'm going to stop here and I'm going to take questions, and I want to thank you to be here with me today.
All right. Well, Sarah, thank you so much for sharing with us today. That was a great presentation. It was really neat to see some of the places you visited around the world, and of course, to see some of the work you're doing with plastic. So thank you so much for sharing that with us today.
Thank you.
All right. Well, let's meet some of our classrooms. So I think a great spot to start. Let's go to, we've got a class joining us in Quebec here in Canada with Mr. Barbie. LaBelle Sarah-Jeanne Royer. I'm going to turn your microphone on and feel free to go ahead and fire away with a question.
Il y aurait une question pour Madame Sarah-Jeanne?
Oui.
Raphaël? Tu peux la poser en deux langues.
We can come back if you need another minute.
Oui, on aurait besoin d'un peu de temps. We need a few minutes.
All right.
Okay.
No problem. Let's jump to another class this time. Let's go to Mr. Ruffin's class. They're joining us in Rochester, Minnesota. How's everyone doing in Minnesota?
Oh, just
All right, who's got a question?
wait, sit down, Ria's up.
Oh. Can we use metal?
Yeah. You mean if we can use metal instead of using single-use plastic?
Yeah.
Yeah, like for example, if I want to avoid using plastic bottles or buying a bottle at the shop, for example, this is a good thing to use. These are bottles that can be washed several times and they keep your water even fresh. So in Hawaii, they are very, very useful and popular. So this is a very good option to replace plastic metal.
All right, thanks for the question to start us off. Mr. Kinser is with a group of grade 1 students in Hawaii. If you don't mind turning your microphone on, Mr. Kinser, the students can say hi and we'd love to take a question.
Aloha. Yeah, good morning. Thank you, Sarah-Jeanne, for being here.
Thank you.
We had a couple questions, but our first one was, how old were you when you first started helping to clean up plastics and clean up the ocean or the planet or wherever you were living?
I was probably 8 years old when I started being concerned about plastic pollution, but at that time, it's almost 30 years ago, there were not so much plastic around. But yeah, I was concerned at a very young age. And it's probably because my mom was also a kind of a hippie. So she was consuming very little material at home. And we would be very concerned with the environment. And we would live out of a few items only. And whenever we would go out of the house, I will always be concerned if I would see trash. So I started very young, but then it evolved into science for me.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Great question to start us off. Mr. Kinser, if you don't mind muting, we'll come back and visit your grade 1s for sure. This time we're going to go to Mr. Middleton's class. They're joining us from Centralia, and I believe that's in Illinois, but let me know if I'm wrong. Let me turn your microphone on.
Illinois.
All right. How's it going, boys and girls?
Yeah.
With living in the middle of the United States, what can 6th graders do to help stop plastic pollution?
Oh, can you repeat that a little louder, please?
Say it louder, Tanner.
With living in the middle of the United States, what can 6th graders do to help stop the pollution?
That's a very good question. I know you guys don't have the sea close by, but we still have a lot of trash that ends up in lakes and rivers. So I guess around you, you must have a few river cleanups as well that you could participate to. But when we look at this pollution issue, plastic pollution issue as a whole, because we are all part of it, I'm sure some of your neighbors, of people around you, they must go to Starbucks and McDonald's and use plastic cups. So refusing plastic power is something you can do even though the sea and the ocean is not close to you.
All right, that's an excellent point, is you can make decisions to stop plastic from getting anywhere near the oceans or being made. So if people stop buying plastic toothbrushes and bought the bamboo ones instead, that would be, the companies wouldn't make the plastic toothbrushes anymore because they're not making any money. So those are simple things you can do. Talk to your parents and make decisions about what you buy at home. Great question and a great answer. We are going to visit British Columbia now. We have a big group of students with Mrs. Holden. It looks like they're grade 4s. And sorry, not British Columbia, Spruce Grove, Alberta. Are you able to turn your microphone on for me? I can't turn it on my end.
Hi, guys. All right, so Marco has a question.
What happens to the caps when they go?
Oh, I can hear.
Can you hear me? Come closer.
What happens to the caps when they go in the ocean?
Bottle cap.
That's a very good question. So the plastic caps that we throw either along the river or along the coastline, they float. So the density of the cap is lower than the water, so they float and they travel all the way, sometimes if it's in Asia, to Hawaii, for example. And if it takes many, many years, these plastic caps, they will degrade into smaller and smaller pieces and may eventually be eaten by the wildlife, by birds and fish, because they don't know if it's food or not. So the plastic caps, they are very, very bad one, and they are the items number 2 that we mostly find in Hawaii. So no plastic caps, no water bottle. You can use this instead.
All right, excellent. Let's go back to our class in Quebec and see if they have a question ready for us.
Yes, I have a question. It's in 2 parts. There's this big project to recuperate all the plastic in the ocean. I don't know if you have seen it. It's like giant nets that will be launched in the ocean to recuperate the plastic. My question is this project viable? And if it is, what will be done with the plastic when it's recuperated?
Yeah, this is the ocean cleanup. They've been working for many, many years on their design, and the idea is basically to clean the garbage patch. This is one amongst many other ideas. There were millions of dollars invested into this project. According to some people, it's a lot of money for removing very little plastic compared to what is being produced and discarded. According to other people, it's a very romantic and very sexy idea, if I can say, of cleaning the ocean. And I think this is how there was so much money that got raised for this immense project. So I think then removing some of the ocean plastic, it helps, and it's definitely a good idea, because if we remove some of the plastic, it's not any longer available for wildlife, or it's not being used any longer for transporting invasive species, or it's not an hazard to navigation. So I'm not saying that it's a bad idea, but at the same time, I have the feeling, living in Hawaii, that we have so much marine debris on our beaches, and still today we don't have enough people and we don't have enough money to remove it all. So sometimes I feel like if there's so much money, millions of dollars that can be invested into cleaning the plastic that already exists, it should also be directed towards cleaning the coastal regions all over the world. For example, if we would clean the beaches in India, in Japan, in China, all this plastic will not enter into the ocean and find itself in the garbage patch. So if you're asking me, the plastic that is already there in the ocean, it has to be removed somehow. So either it goes back to the beach, we clean the ocean, but then eventually we have to stop this plastic production at the source. So we need to stop producing plastic so it doesn't end up in the ocean. And for this only, we need laws and policymakers to put a final stop, at least to single-use plastic, so it never ends up in the ocean. But I feel like all ideas are good. Everybody wants to help somehow, but sometimes maybe with such big amounts of money, we should divide it a little better so we all have a share and a place where we can clean and not only focus on the garbage patch for now. But everything is good. People, they have good heart. They want to do good things, and I cannot say that it's a bad thing.
All right, and I think another good way to look at it too is if your bathtub was overflowing, would you just dry the water on the floor, or would you turn off the tap? So that's important to think about. If you can stop the plastic before it even gets in the ocean, that's going to solve a big, big part of the problem.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Kinser, if you don't mind turning the microphone on, and if you have another question in Hawaii, we'd love to take one from your grade ones.
All right, thank you. Yeah, Emma, you want to ask one?
Someone at my church takes a reusable plate.
Oh, so Emma was just sharing that she knows she has a friend who uses reusable plates when she goes out and reusable dishes when she goes to restaurants. We're also wondering, how can we practice, Sarah-Jeanne, how can we practice becoming scientists like you? We're in the first grade now, but what can we do to sort of start practicing practicing being great scientists?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So big thumbs up for the plate. I'm always so proud when I see kids carrying their own like utensils and butters and plates. I think one day it will be very fashionable. So everybody will have like the most beautiful plate to carry around. So yeah, big thumbs up for that. And how can you get involved and become a scientist or eventually be on the path of becoming a scientist? So with Sustainable Coastlines Hawaii, we work with a lot of students, and we work a lot with citizen science. So every time we do beach cleanups, we have a lot of data after beach cleanup that can be used for science. And we often use like students to help us with the plastic. So it's fairly easy actually. It can be for all ages. You just join a scientist that will be part of a beach cleanup organization, and then you can go for beach cleanup and you can do surveys. So you can count how much plastic, the weight, the colors, and then the type of debris found. And then you can do some small little science study. And that's what we do a lot in Hawaii. And I've been using lots of data from everybody that is doing like beach cleanups, and they are very precious data, and it's truly a way of putting this together. And this is how we realized that bottle caps and cigarette butts, they are like the most commonly found items on tourist beaches. So these are ways that you can do your own little science project. And on the side, I'm always happy to help students. If a student tells me I have to have a project and work on an issue related to plastic, so we'll always do some small experiment in the lab and something that can be shared after that with all the students. So you can get in touch with people that are like already in the plastic world, and I'm sure they will be very happy to help you for small science project. There's so much that can be done.
Thank you.
Right, great question. Mr. Ruffin's class, do you have another question from Minnesota for us?
I have a question. When you went to Antarctica, did you go on land?
Yeah, I did. I got the chance to go and land in Antarctica. I was with penguins over there, so it was very, very special. And yeah, that was the last continent I haven't visited, so I was really, really excited about it. And I met with the people from Argentina. They had a base there, a science base, so I stayed there for a few days. That was very special.
All right, and then in Alberta, Mrs. Holden's group, if you don't mind turning the microphone back on for me, we'd love another question from your big group.
I'm David, and my question is, how long has this been a problem?
Oh my God. So do you know since when plastic has started being produced? It's a long time ago. So let's say 1950. So 1950 was like the time where plastic started booming, and it was so popular at that time. This culture of being able to eat in a plate and then throw it away. So it's been there for almost 70 years now. And the first time, then someone reported so it's been there for a very, very long time. And now we know that plastic is being more and more produced, consumed, and discarded. So this problem is only increasing as we speak. And since it lasts so long in the environment, all the plastic that's been created since the 50s is still today on the planet, unfortunately.
All right, great question.
Thanks.
Thank you.
All right, thank you for the question. Mr. Middleton's group in Illinois, if you guys want to go ahead.
Is it better to use metal or glass instead of plastic?
Yes, it is better. It's better for your health, and it's also better for the environment. Very good question.
One better than the other?
I guess glass is better. Glass is, it comes from sand. It's pretty organic. Metal, sometimes it can have some trace metals that are not very good for you. So I guess glass is one of the best material you could use.
Okay, and then let's jump back to Mr. Harvey's group in Quebec. Do you guys have one more question for us?
Yes, do you hear us?
Yes?
Okay.
Okay, why do most of Asian countries don't have any facilities to recycle?
Yes, this is such a great question. So, yeah, going back to my talk, a lot of the pollution we have in Hawaii comes from Asia. And the reason for it is because they have a lot of issues with plastic waste management. There are so many people, for example, in India and China, then they don't have enough space to dispose their trash and enough facilities, which is really sad. So right now it feels like the government, they don't have this as a priority. In Asia, sometimes you have a lot of issues related to education, to health, to different issues with everyday needs in life. So there are not so much energy that is spent into the plastic waste management issue, which is very unfortunate. And one of the biggest reasons is also education. People, it's really hard for them to understand that when they trash the street or the backyards or the parks or the ocean, then it can eventually have very negative effects. So everything is basically linked to education eventually. And that's why I believe so much in you guys, in the students, in school, in educating people around you. I think it will truly make our world better if people will be more educated, for sure.
All right. Well, class today, thank you for the excellent questions as always. And Sarah, thank you so much for taking some time from your day, for sharing your story and what you're doing with so many great organizations. Thank you so much. It's such a big issue, but this is what we're doing. We're getting the word out, and that's going to make a big difference.
Thank you very much, Joe. And thank you, everyone. It was a pleasure.
All right. If some of the teachers, if you can turn your microphones on for me, I'll do that I can. If you want to say goodbye and thank you, we'll sign off for today. So nice and loud if you can. All right. Thanks, everyone, for hanging out today. More events tomorrow and lots more plastic events next week as well. Thanks, everyone.